The ledger lay closed on the table between them, and Hessa Farrow understood in the sudden silence that she would not be paid. "Experience," the farm owner repeated, his tone flat and final. "That's what you were promised when you signed on, girl. You got a roof over your head, 3 meals a day, and the chance to learn a trade. More than most of your kind could hope for." The late afternoon sun slanted through the office window of the orchard house, painting everything in amber light that should have felt warm but only made the cold settling in Hessa's chest more pronounced. 5 months. 5 months of rising before dawn to climb ladders into apple trees heavy with fruit, her hands sticky with sap and her shoulders aching from the canvas sacks that grew heavier with each passing hour. 5 months of sorting and packing and hauling crates to the wagon yard, of working through rain and heat, while the human workers around her received their weekly wages in copper and silver that clinked real and solid in their palms. She had been young enough to believe the promise of payment at season's end, foolish enough to trust that "we'll settle up when the harvest's sold" meant what it sounded like. "I worked every day," Hessa said, keeping her voice level even as her tusks pressed against her lower lip. "Dawn until dusk. I picked more than anyone except Garrett, and he's been working orchards for 20 years. And you learned, didn't you?" Matthias Zenwood leaned back in his chair, a man in his 50s with silver threading through dark hair and the comfortable bulk of someone who no longer climbed his own trees. "You came here not knowing an apple from a turnip. Now you've got skills. That's worth more than coin to someone in your position. Someone in your position." The words landed like stones, an orc girl alone with nowhere else to go and no one to speak for her. Hessa's hands curled into fists at her sides, her nails biting into her palms. She wanted to overturn the desk, to shout, to make him understand the injustice of it. But what would that accomplish? He would have her thrown off the property, and she would still have nothing. No wages, no references, no way to prove she had spent 5 months earning what she had been promised. "I need that money." The admission came out quieter than she intended. "I need to send it to my mother. She's ill, and my sisters should have thought of that before you walked away from wherever you came from." Matthias stood, clearly considering the matter closed. "You're young. You'll find other work. At least now you can tell people you've done harvest before." The door behind her opened, and Hessa turned to see another man enter, younger than Matthias by perhaps 15 years, with the same dark hair but without the silver, and eyes that were a warmer brown. He wore work clothes dusty from the road, and carried himself with an easy confidence that suggested he belonged here even though Hessa had never seen him before. "Cade," Matthias said, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite pleasure, not quite displeasure. "I thought you were not arriving until tomorrow. Made better time than I expected." Cade Zenwood set a travel bag down by the door, his gaze moving between his brother and Hessa with obvious curiosity. "Am I interrupting something? Just finishing the season's business." "This girl was hired on for the harvest. We're done now, so she'll be on her way." Hessa saw the moment understanding crossed Cade's face. His eyes went to the closed ledger, then to her empty hands, then back to his brother's carefully neutral expression. "She'll be on her way," he repeated slowly. "With her wages, with the experience she earned." The silence that followed was different from the one before. Hessa watched Cade's jaw tighten, watched his hands flex at his sides in a gesture that mirrored her own frustrated anger. When he spoke again, his voice was very calm. "You promised her experience instead of wages. I promised her an opportunity to learn, which she received. How much does she have coming?" Matthias's expression hardened. "That's between me and my workers, Cade. You've been gone 5 years. Don't walk in here and presume to tell me how to run my farm." "How much?" The two brothers stared at each other, and Hessa felt like an intruder in a conflict that went far deeper than one orc girl's unpaid wages. Finally, Matthias opened the ledger with sharp, angry movements. 5 months at harvest rate for unskilled labor. 40 silver. 40 silver. Hessa's breath caught. 40 silver would pay for medicine, for food through the winter, for the leaking roof on her mother's cottage to be properly patched. 40 silver was half a year's survival for her family. 40 silver that you never intended to pay, Cade said. I provided room and board. She ate as well as anyone here. Room and board that she earned with her labor. The same labor you would have paid anyone else to perform. Cade moved further into the room, and there was something dangerous in the deliberateness of his steps. How long have you been doing this? How many workers have you swindled this way? Mind your tongue. This is my property, my business. You gave up any say in it when you ran off to play soldier. I was not playing. The words came out hard and cold, and being gone does not make me blind to what you are doing here. Hessa found her voice, though it came out rougher than she intended. It's all right. I should not have expected anything different. I'll go. Both men turned to look at her, and she hated the heat she felt rising in her face. Hated that they could see her embarrassment, her defeat. She had been so careful, so determined not to be the orc who proved all their worst assumptions right. She had worked harder than anyone, been polite and grateful and unthreatening, and none of it had mattered. Wait. Cade held up a hand. Please, just wait. He turned back to Matthias, and when he spoke his voice was quiet but absolutely firm. You will not do this, not to her, not to anyone else. And who are you to tell me what I will and will not do? You're not part of this operation anymore, little brother. You made that choice. Then consider this a return. I came back to help you expand the orchard, to invest my savings into the family business like you asked in your letters. But I will not be party to this. Either the farm pays its workers fairly or I walk and I take my money with me. Matthias's face had gone red. You would choose her over your own blood, an orc you do not even know. I am choosing what's right over what's easy. There's a difference. Cade pulled a leather purse from his belt, counted out coins with quick, practiced movements. 40 silver, you said. Here. He held the coins out to Hessa, and she stared at them without moving. They gleamed in his palm, real and solid, and more money than she had ever held at once. I can't, she managed. That's your money, your savings, which I'm choosing to spend this way. Please take it. Why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Cade's expression softened. Because you earned it, because it's yours. And because someone needs to make this right, even if my brother won't. Slowly, hardly daring to believe it was real, Hessa reached out and took the coins. They were warm from being in his purse, solid and heavy in her hand. 40 silver, enough to change everything. Thank you, she whispered, and the words felt entirely inadequate. You're welcome. Cade turned back to his brother. We need to talk about this and about how many other workers you've cheated. Get out of my office. No. The single word hung in the air. Hessa clutched her wages to her chest and backed toward the door, not wanting to be present for what was clearly about to become a family explosion. But as she reached for the handle, Cade glanced back at her. Where will you go? He asked. I was staying in the workers' dormitory, but I suppose I should not do that now. There's a boarding house in town. Mrs. Calloway runs it. Tell her I sent you and that I'll cover the first week's rent. When Hessa started to protest, he shook his head. Please, let me do this much at least. It's getting dark and the road is not safe after sunset. I can take care of myself. I don't doubt it, but you do not need to. Not tonight. There was something in his eyes, a gentleness that she had not expected from any human, especially not one related to Matthias Zenwood. Hessa nodded. unable to trust her voice, and slipped out the door before the brothers could resume their argument. The orchard stretched out before her in neat rows, the trees stripped nearly bare now that harvest was done. A few workers still moved among them, doing the final cleanup before winter preparations began. Most of them were human, but she spotted 2 other orcs near the eastern edge and a half-orc woman mending a ladder near the processing barn. She had spoken to them, over the long weeks of harvest, had learned their names and their stories. Kren, who had been working the orchards for 3 seasons and never received more than experience for his trouble. Daria, the half-orc, who stayed because she had 2 children to feed and at least the room and board were reliable. Thorak, who was too old to find work elsewhere and grateful just to have a place to sleep. All of them cheated. All of them trapped. Hessa's hands tightened around her coins as she walked down the long drive toward the road. Behind her, she could hear raised voices from the office, though she could not make out the words. Cade had stood up for her, had given her his own money, 40 silver from his personal savings, because it was the right thing to do, because someone needed to make it right. She had never met anyone like him before. The boarding house was easy to find, a sturdy 2-story building at the edge of the small town that served the farming communities around it. Mrs. Calloway was a round woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and flour on her apron. She looked Hessa up and down when she appeared on the doorstep, but her expression was not unkind. "Help you, Cade Zenwood sent me. He said to tell you he would cover the first week's rent." Mrs. Calloway's eyebrows rose. "Did he now? Cade's back then. About time. That farm needs someone with some sense running it." She stepped aside, gesturing Hessa in. "Come on, then. I've got a room on the 2nd floor, small but clean. Meals are included if you're here at meal times. No guests after dark and no noise after 9 bells. Thank you." Hessa followed her inside, clutching her wages like a lifeline. "I can pay for additional weeks myself. I have money now." "Good for you, girl. Most folks who work for Matthias Zenwood leave with empty pockets and broken promises." Mrs. Calloway led her up a narrow staircase to a small room that held a bed, a washstand, and a single chair by the window. Cade's different, though. Always was. His mother used to say he had too much conscience for business. Hessa set her money on the bed carefully, reverently. "He paid me. Out of his own savings. 40 silver. Did he?" Mrs. Calloway's expression shifted, something like approval lighting her features. "Well, that sounds like Cade. His brother must be having fits. They were arguing when I left. I expect they'll be arguing for a while yet. Those 2 have been oil and water since they were boys." She moved to the door, then paused. "You hungry? I've got stew on and fresh bread." Hessa's stomach chose that moment to remind her that she had been too nervous to eat much at the midday meal. "I am, thank you. What do I owe you for it?" "Tonight, nothing. Consider it a welcome. Tomorrow we'll talk about board rates." Mrs. Calloway's smile was brief but genuine. "Wash up and come down when you're ready. Dining rooms through the kitchen." When she was alone, Hessa sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She counted the coins again, spreading them across the worn quilt. 40 silver. Real, solid, undeniable. Payment for work she had done, handed to her by a man who had no obligation to her at all. Cade Zenwood. She turned the name over in her mind, tried to match it to the image of him standing in his brother's office, anger making his voice cold and his eyes hard. But there had been no anger when he looked at her, only that strange, unexpected gentleness. Why would he do it? Why would anyone, let alone a human man with every reason to side with his own brother, choose to pay a debt that was not his? She did not have an answer. But she knew, with a certainty that settled warm in her chest, that she wanted to thank him properly. Wanted to understand what kind of person did something like that, and why. The stew was rich and hearty, thick with vegetables and meat, and the bread was still warm from the oven. Hessa ate slowly, savoring each bite, while Mrs. Calloway bustled around the kitchen and kept up a running commentary about the town and the farms and the people Hessa should watch out for. "Matthias has been getting worse," she said, rolling out dough for tomorrow's pies. "Used to be he was just tight with money. Now he's outright dishonest, runs off anyone who complains and who's going to take an orc's word over his. You were smart to leave when you did. Some folks try to fight it and end up worse than they started. Cade said he was not going to let it continue. Cade's got a good heart, but I don't know if even he can change his brother. Matthias owns that farm outright. Their father left it to him when he passed, since Cade was off with the military. Legally, Cade's just a guest there until Matthias decides otherwise." Hessa sopped up the last of her stew with a piece of bread, thinking, "But Cade has money. He said something about investing in the expansion." "Did he? Well, that might change things. Matthias has been wanting to plant another 20 acres of trees, but he doesn't have the capital. If Cade's offering to buy in as a partner—" Mrs. Calloway's eyes gleamed with speculation. "That would give him leverage, real leverage. Do you think he will use it for something like this? If Cade Zenwood thinks something's wrong, he doesn't let it lie. That's why he and his brother never got along. Matthias is all about profit and appearances. Cade actually cares about people." She slid the pies into the oven and wiped her hands on her apron. "You finish eating, dear. You look like you could use a good night's sleep." Hessa did sleep, deep and dreamless, and woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of breakfast cooking downstairs. For the first time in months, she did not have to drag herself out of bed before dawn to begin another day of grueling work. For the first time since leaving her family's village, she had money in her pocket and the freedom to decide what came next. She should leave. Take her wages and go home, back to her mother and sisters who needed her. That had been the plan all along. Work the harvest season, earn enough to make a difference, return before the first snow closed the mountain passes. But something held her back. Some unfinished feeling, some sense that walking away now would be leaving a debt unpaid even though she owed Cade Zenwood nothing. He had helped her. Maybe she could help him in return. She dressed and went downstairs to find Mrs. Calloway serving breakfast to a handful of boarders, an elderly tinker, a young couple who were traveling through, and a tired-looking woman with ink-stained fingers who Mrs. Calloway introduced as the schoolteacher. "Sleep well?" the landlady asked, setting a plate of eggs and bacon in front of Hessa. "Better than I have in months, thank you." "Good. You planning to stay in town or moving on?" Hessa cut into her eggs, thinking, "I am not sure yet. I need to send most of this money home, but I thought I might stay a few more days. If that is all right. Stay as long as you like, as long as you can pay the rent. Town can always use another set of hands. Might be work at one of the other farms if you're looking. Maybe." Hessa ate in silence for a moment, then asked, "Do you know where Cade Zenwood is staying? I would like to thank him properly." "He's got family property in town, a little house his mother left him. But if I had to guess, I'd say he spent last night at the farm. He and Matthias have a lot to work out." Mrs. Calloway refilled Hessa's cup with tea. "Give it a day or two before you go looking. Let the brothers finish their fight without an audience." It was good advice, so Hessa took it. She spent the morning finding the postal office and arranging to have 35 of her 40 silver sent to her mother, keeping just 5 for herself. The postal clerk, a nervous young human man who kept glancing at her tusks, promised the money would reach her village within 3 weeks if the weather held. 35 silver. It was more than her family would have seen in 2 years of normal work. More than enough to cover medicine, food, firewood, everything they needed. Hessa felt lighter as she left the postal office, as if a weight she had been carrying for months had finally lifted. With the rest of the morning free, she explored the town. It was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, and she felt the eyes following her as she walked. Orcs were not common here, though not entirely absent either. She saw a few working the docks where wagons came in from the surrounding farms, and one older orc woman sweeping the steps of the general store. "You're new," the woman said when Hessa passed. Her tusks were more prominent than Hessa's, and her green skin was weathered with age and sun. "Working the orchards, I was. Just finished the harvest season." The woman snorted. "Let me guess. Matthias Zenwood told you the experience was payment enough. How did you know?" "Because he pulls that trick every year. Hires on young ones who don't know better, works them through harvest, then sends them off with nothing but empty pockets and hard feelings." She leaned on her broom, eyeing Hessa with something like sympathy. "You at least get out with your dignity intact." "I got paid, actually. His brother gave me what I was owed." The old woman's eyebrows shot up. "Did he now? That would be Cade then. Heard he was coming back. About damn time someone with a backbone showed up at that farm." She stuck out a gnarled hand. "Name's Greta Finn. I've been in this town longer than half the buildings." "Hessa Farrow." She shook the offered hand, grateful for the straightforward greeting. "It is good to meet you. Likewise. You sticking around or heading home with your wages?" "I sent most of it to my family. I thought I might stay a little while, see if there's other work." "Smart girl. Harvests are done for the season, but there's always winter work if you're not picky. Mending, hauling, helping with preserves. I could use a hand here at the store if you're interested. My son runs it, but he's got a bad back and I'm too old to be lifting heavy crates all day." It was more kindness than Hessa had expected to find, and she accepted gratefully. The work was simple enough: moving inventory, sweeping, helping customers find what they needed. Greta's son, Marcus, was a quiet man in his 40s who treated Hessa with the same polite distance he offered all the customers. By the end of the first day, she had earned enough for another few nights at the boarding house, and Greta had promised her regular hours if she wanted them. "You're a good worker," the old orc said as they closed up for the evening. "Reminds me of myself at your age. You've got that same stubborn set to your jaw that says you won't quit just because something's hard. My mother always said I was too stubborn for my own good. There's no such thing. Stubbornness is what keeps folks like us alive." Greta locked the door and pocketed the key. "You plan to go see Cade Zenwood?" Hessa blinked at the abrupt question. "I was thinking about it." "Why?" "Because you've been thinking about it all day and you're not going to settle until you do." "I know the look." Greta's smile was knowing. "He's probably back at his mother's house by now. Little blue cottage on Maple Street, 2 blocks north. Can't miss it." "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been watching. Go on, thank the man properly. Maybe find out what he's planning to do about that brother of his." So Hessa went, her heart beating faster than it should as she walked through the evening streets. The blue cottage was exactly where Greta had said, small and neat with a garden that had been carefully tended before winter set in. Light glowed in the windows, warm and inviting. She knocked before she could lose her nerve. The door opened, and Cade Zenwood stood there in shirt-sleeves and an apron, looking startled and oddly domestic. "Hessa, I hope I am not interrupting. I wanted to thank you, properly I mean, for what you did." "You already thanked me," but he stepped aside, gesturing her in. "Though you are welcome to do it again if it makes you feel better. Come in. I was just making dinner and there's more than enough for two." The cottage was cozy, filled with simple furniture and the lingering scent of herbs and wood polish. Hessa could see the kitchen through an open doorway, and something savory bubbling on the stove that made her mouth water despite the lunch she had eaten. "I did not mean to impose on your meal." "You are not imposing. Honestly, I could use the company. It has been a long 2 days." He led her into the kitchen and gestured to a chair at the small table. "Do you like chicken stew? It is my mother's recipe. I am probably not making it as well as she did, but it is edible." "It smells wonderful." Hessa sat, feeling strange and off balance in this warm, comfortable space. "How did things go with your brother?" Cade's expression darkened. "About as well as could be expected. He told me to mind my own business. I told him I was making it my business." "We did not reach an agreement. I am sorry. I did not mean to cause trouble between you." "You did not cause anything. This has been brewing for years." He stirred the stew, then set the spoon aside and turned to face her fully. "Matthias has been running that farm into moral bankruptcy for a long time. I just did not realize how bad it had gotten until I came back. You were not the first person he cheated, and you would not have been the last. Mrs. Calloway said he owns the farm outright, that you are just a guest there." "Legally, yes. But I have savings, and he needs capital for the expansion he wants. I offered to invest as a full partner on the condition that he reform his labor practices. Pay fair wages, no more of this experience nonsense, and back payment to everyone he has swindled over the past 3 years." Hessa's breath caught. 3 years? How many people? "At least a dozen that I could confirm from his own records. Probably more that he did not bother writing down." Cade's jaw was tight. "The amount he owes is substantial. He claims he cannot afford it, that it would bankrupt the operation." "Can it?" "No. He has been turning a profit hand over fist by not paying his workers. He has money. He just does not want to part with it." Cade turned back to the stove, ladling stew into bowls. "I told him he had 3 days to agree to my terms or I walk, and I make sure everyone in the county knows why. That would destroy his reputation." "Yes, and mine too, probably. But some things are more important than reputation." He set a bowl in front of her along with fresh bread and butter. "Eat. You look like you have been working hard. I got a job at the general store. Greta Fenn hired me. Old Greta, good, she is fair and she will not cheat you." Cade sat across from her with his own bowl, and for a moment they ate in companionable silence. The stew was delicious, rich and perfectly seasoned, and Hessa told him so. "Thank you. My mother insisted I learn to cook before I left for the military. She said a man who could not feed himself was only half a man." His smile was brief and sad. "She died while I was away, 4 years ago. I did not make it back in time to say goodbye. I am sorry. So am I." He broke off a piece of bread, crumbling it between his fingers. She would have been furious if she knew what Matthias was doing. She always believed in treating people fairly, no matter where they came from or what they looked like. It was one of the things that set her apart in this town. "It sets you apart too," Hessa said quietly. "What you did for me. Most people would not have cared. Most people should care more than they do." Cade met her eyes, and there was a fierce intensity in his gaze. "You worked for that money. You earned it. The fact that my brother tried to steal it from you is shameful, and the fact that he has gotten away with it for so long is worse. I cannot fix everything, but I can fix this. I have to. Even if it costs you your relationship with your brother. We have not had much of a relationship for years. This will just make it official." He took a bite of stew, chewed thoughtfully. "What about you? You said you sent money home. How far away is your family?" "About a week's travel north in the mountain villages. My mother is ill, and my younger sisters are not old enough to work yet. I came south looking for wages because there is not much work up there, especially not for orcs." How old are your sisters? 12 and 14. Good girls, smart and hardworking. But there are not many opportunities for them. Hessa stared down at her bowl. I am hoping the money I sent will be enough to get my mother through the winter. In spring, maybe I can go back, help them plant a garden and find steady work. Or you could stay here. Keep working at the store, send money regularly. Cade's voice was careful, like he was afraid of overstepping. It is not my place to tell you what to do, but Greta spoke well of you, and you would have a place at the boarding house as long as you need it. Why do you care? The question came out more blunt than she intended, but she needed to understand. You do not know me. You have no reason to help me beyond what you already did. So why? Cade was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the worn wood of the table. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and honest. Because I spent 5 years in the military seeing what happens when people do not help each other. When everyone looks out only for themselves and turns a blind eye to injustice because it is easier, safer, more profitable. I saw good people destroyed because no one would stand up for them. And I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to be different, to actually make a difference, I would take it, no matter the cost. The words hung in the air between them, raw and real. Hessa felt something shift in her chest, some door opening that she had not even known was closed. You are not like other humans I have met. I am not sure if that is a compliment or an observation. Both, I think. She managed a small smile. Thank you for dinner, and for listening. And for everything else. You are welcome, and Hessa, if you do decide to stay, even just for a little while, I could use help with the farm situation. Someone who can talk to the other orc workers, get their stories, help me document what Matthias has done. I will pay you for your time. Real wages, I mean, not experience. The offer caught her off guard. You want to hire me, if you are willing. I understand if you would rather not get involved, but you have first-hand knowledge of how the operation works, and the other workers might be more comfortable talking to you than to me. I need to build a solid case if I am going to force changes. Hessa thought about Kren and Thorak and Daria, thought about all the others who had been cheated, who were still being cheated, thought about what it would mean to help expose it all, to be part of making things right. I will do it, she said. Not for pay for them, because they deserve better. Then we will call it a collaboration, partners in setting things right. Cade extended his hand across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, Hessa took it. His grip was warm and firm and steady, and she felt that strange flutter in her chest again. Partners, she agreed, and tried to ignore how much she liked the sound of it. Over the next 3 days, Hessa threw herself into the work of documenting Matthias Zenwood's exploitation. With Cade's help, she tracked down former workers who had been promised wages and received nothing. She spoke to Kren and Thorak and Daria at the orchard, carefully and quietly, gathering their stories. She helped Cade go through the farm's records, matching names to dates and calculating what each person should have been paid. The numbers were staggering. Over 3 years, Matthias had cheated nearly 20 workers out of a combined 300 silver. Some had been owed as little as 10 silver for a few weeks of work. Others, like Kren, were owed more than 60 silver for multiple seasons of labor. He kept just enough records to look legitimate, Cade said, spreading papers across his kitchen table on the evening of the second day. But he marked all the orc workers as learning contracts instead of paid labor. It is a legal loophole meant for genuine apprenticeships, not for stealing wages. Can we prove he did it deliberately? The pattern proves it. Every single orc worker classified the same way, while all the human workers received proper wages. It is discrimination, plain and simple. Cade rubbed his face, exhausted. The question is what to do about it. I can threaten to expose him, but that might just make him dig in his heels. And even if I go public, there is no guarantee anyone will care enough to force him to pay. Hessa studied the papers, her mind working. What if we went to the workers directly, told them what they are owed, helped them organize to demand payment together? It would be harder for him to dismiss 20 people than one. That could work, but it is also risky. If Matthias realizes what we are doing before we are ready, he could have everyone fired and blacklist them from other farms. So we move fast. Talk to everyone in the same day, arrange a meeting before he can react. Cade looked at her with something like admiration. You have a tactical mind. Have you considered a career in military planning? I have considered a career in not starving. It teaches similar skills. But she smiled when she said it, and he smiled back, and for a moment the exhaustion and stress faded into something warmer. They worked late into the night, planning and preparing. Mrs. Calloway provided endless tea and eventually insisted they eat something before they collapsed. Greta came by with information about 2 more former workers she had tracked down. Even Marcus, quiet Marcus who usually kept to himself, offered to help spread the word when the time came. It felt like building something, like being part of a community that actually cared about justice. On the morning of the 3rd day, Cade went to the orchard to confront his brother one final time. Hessa wanted to go with him, but he insisted she stay behind. This is between Matthias and me, he said firmly. Family business. If it goes badly, I do not want you caught in the middle. I am already in the middle. He cheated me too. Which is exactly why you should not be there. He will use you as a distraction, try to make it about you instead of about him. Trust me, I know how my brother operates. Cade gripped her shoulders, his expression serious. Stay here. I will come back and tell you how it went. If he agrees to our terms, wonderful. If not, we move forward with the plan to organize the workers. Reluctantly, Hessa agreed. She spent the day at the general store, trying to focus on work but unable to stop thinking about what was happening at the orchard. Greta noticed her distraction and sent her on make work errands just to keep her busy. He'll be fine, the old orc said. Cade's tougher than he looks. And more stubborn than his brother, which is saying something. I know. I just wish I could be there. Sometimes the hardest part of fighting for something is trusting other people to fight alongside you. You have done your part. Now let him do his. It was well past dark when Cade finally returned, and Hessa knew from his expression that it had not gone well. He refused, Cade said flatly, sinking into a chair in his kitchen. He looked exhausted, his hair disheveled and his eyes shadowed. Said I was being naive, that the farm could not sustain fair wages and still turn a profit. I showed him the numbers proving otherwise, and he accused me of falsifying records. When I threatened to go public, he told me I would be destroying the family name for the sake of worthless orc sentiment. Those were his exact words, worthless orc sentiment. Hessa felt anger kindle hot in her chest. So what do? We move forward with the plan. I have already sent word to the workers to meet tomorrow evening at the town hall. We will lay out exactly what is owed, help them understand their rights, and support them in demanding payment as a group. Cade looked up at her, determination hardening his features despite the exhaustion. Matthias will fight it. He will claim I am stirring up trouble, trying to ruin him. He might even try to have me arrested for defamation or theft of business documents, but I do not care anymore. This has to stop. What about your investment, your partnership? There will not be one, I made that clear. I told him I would rather burn my savings than use it to prop up a business built on exploitation. He laughed bitterly. He called me a traitor, said I was choosing strangers over family. Maybe he is right. He is not. Hessa moved to kneel beside his chair, looking up at him intently. You are choosing what is right. That is not betrayal. That is courage. It does not feel very courageous. It feels like I am burning bridges and making enemies. Sometimes that is what courage looks like. She reached up and took his hand, squeezing it gently. You gave me 40 silver when you did not have to. You are fighting for people you barely know at great cost to yourself. If that is not courage, I do not know what is. Cade's fingers tightened around hers, and when he looked at her, there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. I could not have done any of this without you, he said quietly. Your help, your insight, your determination, you have been incredible, Hessa. We are partners, remember. That means we do this together. Partners, he agreed, and the way he said it made it sound like more than a business arrangement. The moment stretched between them, charged and fragile. Hessa became acutely aware of how close they were, of the warmth of his hand in hers, of the way his gaze seemed to trace her features like he was memorizing them. Her heart was beating too fast, and she knew she should pull away, should maintain some professional distance. But she did not want to. Cade, she started, not even sure what she wanted to say. He leaned forward, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. His palm was warm against her skin, his touch gentle and questioning. Tell me to stop, he murmured. If you do not want this, tell me now. She did not tell him to stop. Instead, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of pushing too hard too fast. But then his hand slid into her hair and her arms came up around his neck, and the kiss deepened into something fierce and desperate and real. Hessa felt like she was falling, like the ground had dropped away and the only solid thing left was him, his mouth on hers and his hands pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cade rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that since the moment I met you, he confessed. Is that insane? We have known each other for 3 days. If it is insane, then I am insane too. Hessa laughed shakily. I have been trying not to think about it, trying to focus on the work, on making things right. But every time you look at me, You what? I feel seen. Really seen. Not as an orc or a worker or someone to be pitied, just as me, as Hessa. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. No one has ever made me feel that way before. Good. Cade's smile was soft and wondering. Because that is exactly who I see. Hessa, who is brilliant and brave and stubborn and kind. Hessa, who I am fairly certain I am falling in love with, even though it is too soon and too complicated and probably a terrible idea. Her heart felt like it might burst. It is definitely a terrible idea, she agreed. Your brother will hate it. Half the town will probably disapprove, and I am still not sure what I am doing here or where I will be in a month. Those all sound like problems for future us to worry about. You are right. Hessa kissed him again, softer this time, savoring it. Let future us handle the complications. Right now, I just want this. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the quiet kitchen while the fire burned low in the hearth. Eventually, practical concerns reasserted themselves and Hessa reluctantly pulled away. I should go back to the boarding house. Mrs. Calloway will worry. I will walk you. Cade stood, helping her to her feet. It is late. I can walk myself. I have done it before. I know you can. But I want to. Please. How could she say no to that? So they walked together through the dark streets, hand in hand, not talking much but not needing to. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds, and Hessa felt strangely at peace despite everything that was coming. At the boarding house door, Cade kissed her once more, slow and sweet. Tomorrow is going to be difficult, he said. Whatever happens at that meeting, there will be consequences. Are you sure you want to be part of this? I am sure. We started this together. We finish it together. Partners. Partners. The next day moved with agonizing slowness. Hessa worked her shift at the general store, helped Greta inventory the stock room, smiled at customers and made small talk, all while her mind raced ahead to the evening meeting. Cade had arranged for the town hall, a neutral space where the workers could gather without fear of retaliation. Word had spread quietly through the orc community, passed from worker to worker with the kind of careful discretion that came from years of keeping their heads down and their mouths shut. But today they were going to speak up. Together. As the sun set, Hessa made her way to the town hall. The building was modest, a single large room with plain benches and a small raised platform at one end. Cade was already there, setting out papers and looking nervous. When he saw her, his expression brightened, and he crossed the room to take her hands. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be." People began to trickle in. Kren arrived first, his massive frame filling the doorway as he surveyed the room with wary eyes. Thorak came next, leaning on a cane and moving slowly. Daria brought her children, two small half-orc girls who clung to their mother's skirts. One by one, the workers Matthias had cheated filed in, along with a few human workers who had heard about the meeting and come out of curiosity or solidarity. By the time Cade called the meeting to order, there were nearly 30 people crowded into the hall. "Thank you all for coming," Cade began, standing on the platform so everyone could see him. "I know many of you are taking a risk just by being here, but what I have to share tonight is important, and I wanted you all to hear it at once so there could be no confusion or misunderstanding." He laid out the situation clearly and methodically, showed them the records of who had been promised wages and received nothing, explained the legal loophole Matthias had been exploiting, calculated the total amount owed and broke it down by individual worker. As he spoke, Hessa watched the crowd's reactions shift from confusion to anger to grim determination. "This is not just about money," Cade said. "Though the money matters, and you all deserve every copper you earned, this is about being treated with dignity. About the principle that if you do work, you get paid for it, regardless of who you are or where you come from. My brother has violated that principle repeatedly and deliberately, and I am asking you to help me hold him accountable." "How?" Kren's deep voice rumbled through the hall. "What can we do that won't just get us blacklisted from every farm in the county?" We go to him together. All of us, as a group. We present our case calmly and clearly. We give him one chance to make this right voluntarily. If he refuses, we take it to the magistrate and file formal complaints. Cade's expression was resolute. "I will not lie to you. This will be difficult. Matthias has money and influence and he will fight back. But I have documentation, witnesses, and my own testimony. And I have something else he does not have." "What's that?" someone called from the back. "The moral high ground, and the truth." Cade looked around the room. "I cannot promise this will be easy, but I can promise I will stand with you every step of the way. Whatever consequences come from this, I will face them alongside you. You are not alone in this anymore." The silence that followed was profound. Then Thorak stood, slowly and with difficulty, and spoke in a voice that quavered with age and emotion. "I have been working that orchard for 3 years. 3 years of being told next season, next harvest, we will settle up. 3 years of being too afraid to complain because I had nowhere else to go. If we are really doing this, if we are really standing up together, then I am in." "Me too," Daria said firmly, her arms around her daughters. "And me," Kren agreed. One by one, the others added their voices. Some were angry, some were frightened, but all of them were tired of being cheated, and all of them were willing to try. By the end of the meeting, they had agreed to march to the orchard together the next morning and confront Matthias as a unified group. After everyone else had left, Cade sagged against the platform, exhausted and exhilarated. "That went better than I expected." "You were amazing," Hessa said, coming to stand beside him. "You gave them hope, real hope. That matters more than you know. I just hope I can deliver on it." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "This is going to get ugly, Hessa. My brother will not go down without a fight. He might target you specifically, try to use you as an example. Let him try. I am not afraid of him." "I know you are not, but I am afraid for you." Cade reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her pointed ear, his touch achingly gentle. "I could not bear it if something happened to you because of this." "Nothing is going to happen to me. We are doing this together, remember?" Hessa caught his hand and held it against her cheek. "Stop trying to protect me from my own choices. I am exactly where I want to be. Even if being here means standing against my brother, even if it means this town might turn against you, even then." She smiled, fierce and certain. "I have you. That is enough." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like he was trying to pour all his fear and hope and love into the contact. Hessa kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt, and for a moment the rest of the world fell away. When morning came, bright and cold, the workers gathered at the edge of town and marched to the orchard together. It was a strange procession, 20 orcs and half-orcs and a handful of sympathetic humans walking side by side, their breath misting in the chill air. Cade and Hessa walked at the front, and she felt the weight of every eye on them. This was it. The moment when everything would change, one way or another. Matthias was waiting for them in the orchard yard, his arms crossed and his expression thunderous. He had clearly heard they were coming, probably from one of the workers who still lived on the property. Behind him stood 3 hired men, big and mean-looking, the kind who got paid to intimidate rather than farm. "What is this?" Matthias demanded as the group came to a halt. "I will not have a mob on my property." "This is not a mob," Cade said calmly. "These are your workers, past and present. They are here to request what they are owed. They are owed nothing. I already explained this to you. Then let me explain it to them." Cade moved forward and Hessa stayed at his side, refusing to be left behind. "These people worked for you in good faith. They were promised payment, either in wages or in the expectation of wages at season's end. You did not pay them. That is theft, Matthias. Plain and simple. It is not theft if there was never an agreement to pay actual wages. They signed learning contracts. Contracts you deliberately misrepresented. Contracts you had no intention of honoring." Cade pulled out the sheaf of papers they had prepared, the documented proof of every missing wage. "I have records. I have witnesses. I have testimony. And I am prepared to take all of it to the magistrate if you do not agree to pay what is owed right now." Matthias's face had gone dark red. "You would really do it? You would really destroy your own family over this?" "I am not destroying anything. You did that yourself when you decided profit was more important than integrity. I built this farm from nothing. I have worked every day to make it successful, to honor our father's legacy. And you swoop in after years away and dare to tell me I am doing it wrong. I am telling you that cheating people is wrong, that exploiting vulnerable workers is wrong, that hiding behind legal loopholes to avoid paying honest wages is wrong." Cade's voice was steady, but Hessa could see the tension in his shoulders, the pain in his eyes. "I know you have worked hard. I know you have sacrificed, but that does not give you the right to make other people pay the cost of your success. And what about your precious orc girl there?" Matthias jerked his chin toward Hessa with open contempt. "Is she paying you to be her champion, or is she paying in other ways? Everyone can see how you look at her." The words were designed to wound, and they hit their mark. Hessa felt heat flood her face, felt the stares of the crowd shift to her. But before she could respond, Cade stepped forward, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "You will not speak about her that way. Ever. She is worth 10 of you, and she has shown more courage and integrity in 3 days than you have in your entire life." He met his brother's eyes without flinching. "Make your choice, Matthias. Pay what you owe or face the consequences." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then Matthias laughed, sharp and bitter. "Fine, you want to play this game, let us play. I will pay them. Every last copper, but you," he pointed at Cade. "You are no longer welcome here, not on my property, not in my home. You want to side with them over your own blood. Then you can live with them, work with them, starve with them for all I care. We are done." "I can live with that," Cade said quietly. Matthias turned and stalked toward the house, his hired men following. The workers stood in uncertain silence, not quite believing what had just happened. Then Thorak cleared his throat. "Did he just agree to pay us?" "He did," Cade confirmed. "And I will make sure he follows through. It might take time to get the money together, but you will get what you are owed. All of you." A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd. People began talking, some laughing with relief, others still wary but cautiously hopeful. Hessa found herself surrounded by grateful workers, orcs who had spent years being cheated finally seeing a glimmer of justice. But even as she accepted their thanks, her eyes kept drifting to Cade. He stood apart from the celebration, his expression distant, and she knew he was processing what he had just lost. His relationship with his brother, probably forever. His place in his family. His claim to the farm his father had built, all of it, given up for the sake of doing what was right. When the crowd finally dispersed, workers heading back to their homes or the dormitory with promises to return in a few days for their wages, Hessa went to him. "Are you all right?" "I do not know yet," Cade admitted. "Ask me again in a few days. You did the right thing. I know. That does not make it hurt less." Hessa took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Come on. Let us go back to town. Mrs. Calloway will feed us and Greta will want to hear what happened. You do not have to process this alone." He squeezed her hand, grateful. "What did I do to deserve you? You paid me 40 silver out of your own savings," she reminded him. Everything else just followed from that. Over the next week, Matthias grudgingly made good on his word. It took him 3 days to come up with the money, during which time the workers maintained their unified front, refusing to return to work until they were paid. Cade spent those days in town, staying at his mother's cottage and helping coordinate the workers' efforts. The magistrate got involved briefly, more to mediate than to adjudicate, and Matthias clearly hated every moment of it, but in the end, the workers got their wages. Every copper owed counted out into their hands in front of witnesses to prevent any later disputes. Hessa stood with Cade as each person received their payment, watched their faces transform with relief and gratitude, and felt a fierce pride in what they had accomplished together. Daria cried when she was handed her 60 silver, clutching the coins to her chest like treasure. Thorak's gnarled hands shook as he counted his 48 silver, more money than he had ever held at once. Kren just nodded solemnly, his tusks catching the light, and said, "Thank you," in a voice rough with emotion. When it was done, when the last worker had been paid and Matthias had retreated to his office with his ledger and his bitterness, the orchard felt different, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. "What happens now?" Hessa asked as she and Cade walked back toward town. "He paid them, but he is still running the farm the same way. Nothing really changes for the next group of workers." "Actually, something has changed," Cade said. "Word will spread. Everyone in the county will know what happened here, and workers will be more careful about signing contracts with him. His reputation is damaged, and that will cost him more than the wages ever could." "Is that enough?" It is a start. He paused on the road, turning to face her. Hessa, I have been thinking. About the farm, about my savings, about what I want to do next. Her heart beat faster. And I want to start my own orchard, smaller than Matthias's, at least at first. But run honestly, with fair wages and proper contracts and treatment for everyone who works there. His eyes were bright with the dream of it. I have enough saved to buy land and plant a few acres of trees. It will take years before they are productive, but in the meantime I can hire out as a laborer, supplement the income. I could make it work. That sounds amazing, Hessa said softly. It would be more amazing if you were part of it. He took both her hands in his expression earnest and vulnerable. I know we have only known each other for a week. I know this is fast and probably crazy, but I do not want to do this without you. I want you as my partner, Hessa, in the farm, in my life, in everything. Her breath caught. Cade, you do not have to answer now. Take time to think about it, figure out what you want. But I needed you to know that I am not offering you a job or charity. I am offering you a future with me, if you want it. Hessa's mind was spinning. A week ago, she had been a cheated worker with nothing but anger and empty hands. Now she stood on a country road with a man who had risked everything for her, for workers like her, for the principle of doing what was right. A man who looked at her and saw not an orc to be exploited but a partner to build a life with. I want it, she said, the words coming easier than she expected. I want all of it. The farm, the partnership, the future. I want you. Cade's smile was like sunrise. He pulled her close and kissed her, right there on the open road where anyone might see, and Hessa did not care who was watching. This was hers. He was hers. And she was going to hold on to it with everything she had. We will need to find land, she said when they finally broke apart. Good soil, accessible water, protection from the worst of the winter winds. I already have a few parcels in mind. There is a plot about 2 miles south of town, 20 acres that came up for sale last month. The owner is motivated and the price is reasonable. Then we should look at it. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, he agreed, and the word felt like a promise. They looked at the land the next day, and it was perfect. Rolling hills with good drainage, a stream running along the eastern boundary, and enough cleared space to start planting immediately. The current owner, an elderly farmer named Willem, was happy to sell to Cade, especially when he learned what the intended use was. An orchard run honestly. Willem's weathered face creased into a smile. About time someone set a good example. Matthias Zenwood has been a stain on this community for too long. They closed the deal within the week. Cade paid for the land and the first round of supplies with his savings, leaving just enough to cover expenses until the following spring. It was a risk, a huge gamble that might not pay off for years. But when Hessa saw the way Cade looked at those empty acres, his eyes full of dreams and determination, she knew they would make it work. The first few months were brutal. They lived in a small tent on the property while Cade built a cabin with his own hands, Hessa helping however she could. She learned to mix mortar and lay foundations, to fell trees and shape logs, to hang doors and seal roofs against the rain. Her muscles ached constantly, and her hands developed new calluses over the old ones. But every night, when they sat by the fire and planned the next day's work, she felt more satisfied than she ever had picking apples for someone else's profit. Winter came, hard and cold, and they weathered it together in the newly finished cabin. Cade hired out to neighboring farms for carpentry and repair work, bringing in enough coin to keep them fed and warm. Hessa took odd jobs in town, working for Greta at the store and helping Mrs. Calloway with the boarding house cooking. The money was tight, but it was theirs, earned honestly and spent carefully. news from Matthias's orchard trickled in through the winter. He had hired new workers for the spring planting, but word had spread about what had happened, and he had trouble finding people willing to take the risk. Several of the orcs he had cheated, including Kren and Daria, had found work at other farms that treated them better. The orchard's reputation was in tatters, and Matthias's profits suffered for it. Hessa tried not to take satisfaction in it, but she could not help feeling that justice had been served, at least a little bit. In early spring, before the planting season began, Cade made a trip to town and returned with a smile on his face and a small velvet box in his pocket. "What is that?" Hessa asked, though her heart already knew. "Open it and see." Inside was a ring, simple silver with a small green stone that caught the light. It was nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but it was the most beautiful thing Hessa had ever seen. "Hessa Farrow," Cade said, dropping to one knee in the mud of their half-finished orchard. "Would you marry me? Would you be my wife, my partner, the person I build this life with? I do not have much to offer besides hard work and uncertain prospects, but I can promise you that I will love you with everything I have for as long as I live." She was crying before he finished, tears streaming down her face as she pulled him to his feet. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They stood there among the saplings, holding each other, and Hessa felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. They married in late spring, in a small ceremony at the town hall with Greta and Mrs. Calloway as witnesses. The magistrate performed the ceremony, and if he had any reservations about officiating a marriage between a human man and an orc woman, he kept them to himself. A handful of the workers from Matthias's orchard attended, along with Greta's son Marcus and several other townspeople who had come to respect what Cade and Hessa were trying to build. Matthias did not attend. No one expected him to. After the ceremony, they went back to the orchard and planted the final row of apple trees, working side by side in the golden afternoon light. It felt right, Hessa thought, to mark their marriage by literally putting down roots together. "It will be 5 years before these trees produce a real harvest," Cade said, packing soil around a sapling. "Are you prepared to wait that long?" "I have waited my whole life to find something worth building," Hessa replied. "I can wait 5 more years." The work was constant and exhausting and wonderful. They hired workers when they could afford it, paying fair wages and treating everyone with the respect Matthias had never shown. Word spread that the Zenwood orchard, Cade's orchard, was a good place to work, and they never had trouble finding help when they needed it. Kren signed on as their first permanent employee, bringing his experience and his steady reliability. Daria came to work part-time, bringing her daughters with her. Slowly, worker by worker, they built something that felt less like a business and more like a community. The trees grew, slowly but surely, their roots reaching deep into the soil. The cabin expanded as Cade added rooms and improvements. Hessa learned to keep accounts and negotiate with suppliers, using skills she had never known she had. Together, they transformed those 20 acres from empty land into a thriving operation. 3 years after the planting, the trees flowered for the first time. Hessa stood among the white blossoms, breathing in their sweet scent, and felt tears prick her eyes. They had done it. Against all odds, despite the hardships and setbacks, they had built something real. "It is beautiful," Cade said, coming to stand beside her. "Just like you. Flatterer. Truth teller." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing in this. For believing in me. For being willing to take a chance on a man with more dreams than common sense." "Your dreams are what I love most about you," Hessa said, lacing her fingers with his. Well, that and your cooking. He laughed, the sound warm and rich, and she leaned back into him. They stood like that for a long time, watching the wind move through the blossoming trees, and Hessa thought about how far they had come. From that first moment in Matthias's office, when Cade had handed her 40 silver and changed the course of her life, to this moment standing in their own orchard surrounded by the fruit of their shared labor. 2 years later, the trees produced their first real harvest. It was not huge, maybe a tenth of what a mature orchard would yield, but it was theirs. They picked the apples carefully, sorted them lovingly, and sold them at the market for prices that made other farmers raise their eyebrows. Zenwood Orchard apples, the sign said. Grown with care, sold with honesty. They sold every last one. On the evening after market day, Cade gathered all their workers in the yard and called them to attention. This was our first real harvest, he said. Small but successful. And none of it would have been possible without your hard work and dedication. He pulled out a ledger, opened it to show the accounting. Here is what we earned. Here is what we need to keep back for supplies and expenses. And here is what is left to divide among the workers. He went down the list, calling each person forward, counting wages into their hands. Fair wages, honest wages, payment that reflected the work they had done. When he reached Hessa, he paused. Hessa Farrow Zenwood, wife, partner, co-owner of this operation. You have worked harder than anyone, sacrificed more than anyone, and earned more than anyone. He counted out a share double what anyone else had received. This is yours. You earned every copper. Hessa looked at the coins in her hands, then at the faces around her, workers who had trusted them to do right by them. Then she looked at Cade, her husband, her partner in every sense that mattered. We earned it, she corrected gently. Together. He smiled, that soft, wonderful smile that still made her heart flutter even after years of marriage. Together, he agreed. That night, after the workers had gone home and the farm was quiet, they sat on the porch of their cabin and looked out over the orchard. The trees stood in neat rows, their branches heavy with the promise of future harvests. The stream babbled along the eastern boundary, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. You ever regret it? Cade asked suddenly. Staying here, building this life. You could have gone home to your family. You could have taken that 40 silver and never looked back. I sent my family money, Hessa reminded him, enough to make a real difference. My mother recovered, my sisters are doing well. I visit them twice a year and they are proud of what we have built here. But do you regret staying? She turned to look at him, this man who had given her so much more than wages. Not for a single moment. This is my home now. You are my home. And this. She gestured to the orchard, to the life they had built together. This is everything I ever wanted and more than I knew to dream of. Good. He pulled her close, kissing her temple, because I could not have done any of this without you. Partners, she said, the word they had spoken to each other so many times it had become a promise, a prayer, a foundation. Partners, he agreed. Always. The years that followed were full of hard work and small triumphs. The orchard grew and flourished, becoming known throughout the region for the quality of its fruit and the fairness of its labor practices. Other farmers began to follow their example, treating workers better, paying honest wages, and discovering that ethical business could still be profitable. Matthias's orchard continued to decline. He never recovered from the reputation damage, and eventually he was forced to sell to a consortium of investors who promptly reformed the operation. The last Hessa heard, he had moved to a city far away, bitter and isolated. She tried to feel sympathy for him, tried to remember that he was Cade's brother, family, someone who had once mattered. But mostly she just felt sad that he had never understood what Cade had known instinctively. that people were more important than profit, and that doing right by others was its own reward. 5 years after their marriage, on a golden autumn evening when the orchard was heavy with its best harvest yet, Hessa realized she was pregnant. She told Cade that night, nervous and excited, and watched his face transform with wonder. "Really? We are going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, and she held onto him and laughed too, giddy with the enormity of it. They were going to be parents. They were going to raise a child here, in this orchard they had built together, and teach that child the values they had fought so hard to uphold. Their daughter was born the following spring, small and perfect with green-tinted skin and tiny pointed ears. They named her Olivia, and she was the light of their lives. Cade held her with the same careful reverence he had shown those first apple saplings, supporting her head and gazing at her with absolute devotion. "She has your eyes," he said softly, "and your strength, I can already tell." "She has your stubbornness," Hessa countered, watching their daughter grip Cade's finger with tiny, determined hands. "We are in trouble, the best kind of trouble." Olivia grew up running through the orchard rows, learning to climb trees before she could write her name, and understanding from the earliest age that hard work and honest dealing were the foundation of everything. She was bright and curious and fearless, asking endless questions about everything from why apples grew in different colors to why some people in town looked at her family strangely. "Some people do not understand that love is bigger than differences," Hessa explained when Olivia asked why the baker's wife always frowned at them. "They think humans should only love humans and orcs should only love orcs, but they are wrong." "How do you know they are wrong?" "Because you exist. You are proof that love makes something beautiful when it crosses boundaries." Olivia seemed to accept this, and Hessa hoped she was giving her daughter the tools to face a world that would not always be kind to her mixed heritage. But the orchard provided a safe haven, a place where Olivia was just herself, surrounded by workers of all kinds who loved her and watched out for her. Kren carved her toys from scrap wood. Daria's daughters, now teenagers, taught her games and songs. Mrs. Calloway baked her special treats when Cade brought the family to town. She was loved thoroughly and completely, and that love was armor against whatever ignorance the world might throw at her. When Olivia was 3, a second child arrived, a son they named Samuel. He had more of Cade's features, with only a faint green tint to his skin and ears that were barely pointed. But he had inherited Hessa's determination, announcing his presence in the world with a cry that could be heard across the entire orchard. 2 children, a thriving farm, a marriage built on partnership and respect and deep, abiding love. It was more than Hessa had ever imagined that day in Matthias's office, standing empty-handed and furious while an unjust man explained why she was worth nothing. She was worth everything. They all were. And she had found someone who understood that, who would stand up for it even at great personal cost, who would pay 40 silver out of his own savings to prove that principle mattered more than profit. On their 10th anniversary, Cade took Hessa back to the spot where they had planted that final row of trees on their wedding day. The trees were mature now, heavy with fruit, their branches forming a canopy overhead. 10 years, he said, taking her hands. 10 years since we made this commitment. 10 years of building something together. The best 10 years of my life, Hessa said, mine too. He pulled a small box from his pocket and she laughed. Another ring, better. Look. Inside was a deed, official and legal, with both their names printed in bold letters. Zenwood Orchard. Owners, Cade Zenwood and Hessa Farrow Zenwood. Equal partners. "We have always been equal partners," Hessa said, confused. "Yes, But now it is official, legal. I had the documents drawn up months ago, but I wanted to give them to you today. Everything we have built, everything we own, it is ours. Truly, legally, equally ours. Hessa stared at the paper, at their names side by side, and felt tears well up. It should not matter, she thought. They had never needed legal documents to know they were partners in every sense that counted. But it did matter somehow. It was validation, recognition, proof that their partnership was real and binding and protected by law. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. For saying yes to a man with more dreams than sense. For taking a chance on 40 silver and a promise. For building this life with me." Cade cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I would do it all again, Hessa. Every hard choice, every sacrifice, every difficult moment, because they all led me here to you, to this." She kissed him then, deep and sweet and full of 10 years of love and partnership and shared triumphs. Around them, the orchard rustled in the breeze, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear Olivia and Samuel playing. This was what that 40 silver had bought, she realized. Not just wages for work performed, though that mattered. Not just justice for workers cheated, though that was important. It had bought the possibility of something more. The chance for a connection, a partnership, a love that crossed boundaries and built bridges and proved that doing right by others could create something beautiful. "We should get back," Cade said eventually, reluctantly. "The children will be wondering where we went." "Let them wonder a little longer." Hessa pulled him close, savoring the moment. Just a little longer. They stood together under the apple trees, two people who had taken a chance on each other and built something extraordinary, an orchard, a family. A life defined not by the prejudices they had faced, but by the principles they had upheld and the love they had chosen. It had started with 40 silver, paid from savings when it was not required, given freely because it was right. And from that single act of decency had grown everything that mattered. Hessa had learned many things in the years since leaving her mountain village. She had learned to pick apples and keep accounts, to build cabins and raise children, to stand up for herself and fight for others. But the most important thing she had learned was this: that kindness mattered, that integrity had value, and that sometimes the smallest acts of decency could change entire lives. Cade had paid her back pay from his own savings, expecting nothing in return. And in doing so, he had given her not just money but hope, not just wages but dignity, not just payment but partnership. She would spend the rest of her life making sure that investment paid dividends, that the chance he had taken on her bore fruit as abundantly as the trees around them. She would work hard and love fiercely and teach her children that people mattered more than profit, that doing right was always worth the cost. And every harvest, when they counted wages into the hands of their workers, she would remember what it felt like to stand in Matthias's office with empty hands and a breaking heart. Would remember the moment Cade Zenwood had stepped in and made things right. That memory would keep her honest, would keep her fair, would remind her always that the way you treated people in their vulnerability defined who you were in your power. As the sun set over Zenwood Orchard, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Hessa and Cade walked back toward their cabin hand in hand. Their children's laughter drifted through the trees, sweet as the apples growing there. Workers were finishing their day's labor, calling goodbyes to each other as they headed home with fair wages in their pockets. Everything was as it should be. Honest, earned and built on a foundation of mutual respect and care. It had all started with 40 silver, but it had grown into something worth far more than any amount of money could measure. It had grown into home,